So, hi everybody, and thanks so much for joining us this evening for another Restless event with our partners, My Menopause Centre. And this evening, we're looking at how lifestyle medicine can support your menopause journey. So, before I hand over to Helen, just to remind you all that I want to post your questions and thoughts in the chat function at the bottom of your screens, and feel free to post throughout the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end as well. The event will run for 1 hour and we are recording it, so you will all get mailed the recording afterwards. So I'll hand over now to our panel chair, Helen Normoyle, who is co-founder of My Menopause Centre. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks so much, Aideen, and hello everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you all. Now at My Menopause Centre, as those of you who've joined previous webinars will know, we're really passionate about empowering women with evidence-based information and practical tools and advice to help you thrive through the menopause and beyond. Now, this year's World Menopause Day theme is Menopause and Lifestyle Medicine, and this is such an important topic because lifestyle plays a vital role not only in how we experience menopause symptoms, but also our long-term health and well-being. And tonight we'll be exploring the 6 key pillars of lifestyle medicine and how each of these can help us feel our best through the menopause transition and midlife in general. Now, just a quick reminder, we can't offer personal medical advice tonight, but Dr. Clare will share general guidance with you that can help you discuss your own needs with your healthcare professional. So, and that's a good segue into, I'm joined by my wonderful co-founder, Dr. Clare Spencer. Dr. Clare is a GP and a menopause specialist, and she's been supporting women through this life stage for many years. Dr. Clare, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Helen.
Now, just to recap on what the 6 key pillars of lifestyle medicine are that we're going to cover tonight, they are healthy eating, physical activity, restorative sleep, stress management, avoidance of risky substances, and positive social connections. Now, we'll cover these over the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes. If you have any questions, as Aideen says, please do pop them in the chat. We'll either weave them into the conversation or take them at the end, and we'll aim to get to as many as possible. So, Dr. Clare, if we start with healthy eating, now healthy eating is the foundation of so much of our health. And we know that around half of women experience weight gain during the menopause transition, typically 1.5 kilos a year during the perimenopause. And unfortunately, that can mean a total weight gain of around 10 kilos. And I know it's so unfair. But Dr. Clare, if you could explain to us why this matters and what we can do about it.
Yes, no, thank you. Thanks, Helen. It's great to be here talking to everybody this evening. So weight gain in the menopause is really distressing and it's really common. And often women think it's their HRT that's causing weight gain, but actually there's no evidence that weight gain is caused by HRT. What's happening is as you lose estrogen, as you go through that menopause transition, there are sort of 2 significant changes. You start to develop something called insulin resistance, which means that we're more likely to put extra carbohydrate on as fat around our middle, and we redistribute fat to round our middle, so turn into more of an apple than a pear. And unfortunately, that fat around the middle then makes the issue worse. And so extra calories, extra carbohydrates are put on as fat. And then we have to add on to that the fact that we have a tendency, as we lose estrogen, to lose muscle mass as well. And that can slow our metabolic rate. And then if we take the secondary things that might be happening, so our mood might be a bit lower, our anxiety might be a bit higher, and we might not feel quite as motivated as we did before, we might not feel as self-confident as we did before, all of this can lead to stopping moving, not burning so many calories, or also making, not, I don't want to use the word wrong, but less healthy choices when it comes to diet. And to answer your question, it really matters, unfortunately, because as we gain weight, we know that there are certain health risks. So our risk of heart disease starts to increase. Type 2 diabetes can be related to high blood pressure. That's an important risk factor for heart disease. Some forms of cancer are related to obesity. And then also the psychological impacts, that ever decreasing circle of the low self-esteem and motivation stopping you exercising, or influencing food choices or choices around alcohol. And then all of that can then feed into low self-esteem, and low self-esteem feeds the issue. So it's really a big issue for many women, and it's quite hard to try and break that vicious cycle. But it is possible, but we have to make small changes that we can sustain rather than just trying to reinvent the wheel overnight.
Yeah, look, thanks so much. That's a really helpful, overview and explanation of why this happens. And I think it's really important that women understand these are changes that are happening in their body. It's not necessarily that they're always making poorer choices. This happens through the menopause transition, but it's important to recognize our bodies are changing. Therefore, we do need to maybe adjust some of the things that we're doing, as you mentioned. But can you share with us what you would recommend to the women that you see in your clinic? And what advice you would give them around, what a menopause friendly or a balanced nutritional plan or diet would look like?
Yeah, so there's been some research in this area, and unfortunately, there's no one best menopause diet, so that there are lots of things to consider. So if we think about symptoms of the menopause, for example, hot flushes and night sweats or mood changes, we know that avoiding caffeine and minimizing alcohol, and for some it'll be spicy foods, for some it'll be hot drinks. So making small adjustments that can keep our body temperature on an even keel, and that can help in the management of hot flushes and night sweats, as can keeping your blood sugar on an even keel as well. So if you have really sugary sweet things, you get a big burst of blood sugar. And actually for some women, that can trigger a hot sweat also. So if you are type 2 diabetic, where you have a higher blood sugar, unless you really manage that, then symptoms can worsen also. So we've got the bit about symptoms. The second bit is all about managing the long-term health consequences of the menopause. So as we go through the menopause, our risk of heart disease overtakes that of men's, and also our risk of osteoporosis and fractures. So in terms of risk of heart disease and protecting our brain, then really the best evidence is all around the Mediterranean diet, which is, if you're not quite sure, it's basically a plant-based diet with lean meat, like fish or chicken, and olive oil, and lots of plants and fruit and seeds and nuts. So that can really help protect our heart and our brain. And there's some evidence around reduction of risk of dementia and Mediterranean diet. In terms of weight loss, it's really tricky. And I think working with a dietitian to look at what you're eating and why you're eating it can be super helpful to try and engender behavioral change, which is really challenging, particularly at this time. There is some evidence to suggest that time restricted eating or intermittent fasting may suit some women, but not others. And certainly this is not an area where one size fits all. The key thing is to make small changes, or to make changes that you can sustain into the future, because there aren't, unfortunately, any quick fixes around this. And then just to really quickly finish off, that to help prevent osteoporosis, making sure you've got enough vitamin D in your diet, making sure you've got enough calcium, the building blocks of bones. And everybody in the UK, men and women, should take vitamin D in the winter months. But if you're in the menopause transition, you probably need about 600 to 800 international units. But if you are at increased risk, or you have less sunlight than others, then possibly 800 to 1,000 international units of vitamin D. So yes, I've just seen you've got a dietitian blog. That was really helpful, the blog by Clare Grace on looking at eating.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And really helpful to know the recommended daily allowance for vitamin D, because we often get a lot of questions on that. Now, before we move on to the second pillar of lifestyle medicine, can you share with us any thoughts that you have on how we can make healthy eating more realistic and achievable, particularly, you know, most of us are busy at home, can be busy at work, busy looking after parents or children. So sometimes it's easier said than done, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure we've all got our own techniques. I think preparation is key, just having lots of easily accessible, healthy snacks in your fridge. In the blogs that we've got on our website, there's some ideas about the proportion of food on your plate, and it's just in terms of protein and fruit and vegetables and carbohydrates. But and it's also being really mindful of what you're eating. So easily accessible, quick fixes in your fridge that are not ultra processed. So, you know, maybe some nuts. If you look on the blog, there's some really good top tips. And then wherever you can, try and avoid just mindful eating. If it means keeping a food diary for 2 or 3 days, but obviously not getting obsessed by it, then just keeping a check. And don't forget, alcohol is full of calories. And it's so easy if you can't get to sleep, you want to relax in the evening, to reach for a glass of wine that could have, you know, 200-300 calories in it also. So I am not a dietitian, but they would be my top tips. And then have a look at the blogs on our website.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. That's very helpful. Couple of related questions before we move on then. Great question here. Thank you, Linda. Can one overdose on vitamin D?
Yes, very simple answer. You can. And the risk is it then puts your calcium up too high, and that can be dangerous. So if you're worried about your vitamin D intake, have a chat with your GP.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then another great question here from Louisa. Does a higher protein diet help?
Yeah, so part of this will be due to calories. So it's very individual, and the evidence around this is really poor. If a higher protein, lower carbohydrate diet suits you, then that's great. But it's making sure the protein is lean protein. Not all protein is equal. So there's been a lot of publicity this week around processed meats and the increased risk of bowel cancer. So and also red meat can be linked to some health risks as well if you have too much of it. So yes, but everything in moderation, and it's important to look at the whole balance and don't miss out on the vitamins and minerals that you may if you substitute, say, vegetables or fruit for protein. So in the long term, balance is usually better.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And I posted a link to the article you wrote in our symptom checker about weight gain in the menopause, and some brilliant advice in that. And as you mentioned, a blog that a dietitian, Claire Grace, wrote for us, which has lots of practical advice in there and some example meal plans. And for the lady with the question about alternatives to herbs and so on, herbal medicines and so on, to help with hot flushes, I posted the link to the article that you wrote, Claire, on hot flushes and night sweats, and there's some good advice on prescribable alternatives in there. So hopefully that is helping everyone. Claire, second pillar of lifestyle medicine is physical activity. And, you know, exercise is often described as medicine in itself, as we know. So if you can just share with us, first of all, why is exercise so important, and how can it help us in the menopause transition?
Yes, so going back to what I was saying earlier, so as we lose muscle mass, we need to do something to prevent that from happening and to build muscle mass, and then to help reduce our risk of heart disease. And we know that physical activity can help us. And also in terms of helping manage cognitive and psychological symptoms, exercise can be a huge stress relief. And we talk about exercise loosely to involve lots of different types of movement. We don't need to lift weights necessarily, although I find it's really enjoyable, but you know, just using your own body weight can be as good. So for example, in yoga and Pilates or Tai Chi, I've got an older patient who swears by Tai Chi. So it's finding what works for you. In terms of reducing the risk of heart disease, there are some NHS recommendations. For example, around 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity is advised, or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity activity. But the key thing is just start moving if you're not moving. You do not have to think that you have to meet those limits in the first month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. They're just what to aim for, and just any movement will be beneficial to your well-being, to maintaining muscle mass, and then just being able to build it up really, really slowly. So it's reduction of risk of heart disease, maintaining muscle mass, and doing sort of weight-bearing exercise, which can be like fast walking, for example, where there's jolting. That can help maintain bone density and help build bone density, can help prevent fractures. So we've got the long-term health risks, and then in terms of symptom management, the sense of well-being, stress relief can help cognitive function, help your libido. You know, I cannot recommend enough to do some form of exercise, and you can do it with friends, you could do it by yourself. You know, that there are many benefits to moving.
And then how much is recommended, Claire? How much
Yeah.
exercise?
Yeah, so the NHS recommendations are 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity. So that's where your pulse, you're starting to get a little bit out of breaths, or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity. So that is in doses. You don't have to do it all at once, or a combination of both. But as I stressed, that's something to, if you're not close to that, do not be put off for that. Don't set yourself up for failure. Just even setting your timer for 5 minutes and walking outside for 5 minutes and coming home again is better than nothing, and you'll feel refreshed.
There's a very pertinent question here, and a great question from Rachel. Thank you very much. What advice would you give for, you know, those of us who want to exercise, and intellectually, you know, we know in our heads what we need to do, but it's like, how do we just get the motivation? And, you know, fatigue can be a barrier as well. So I suppose
yeah.
two related questions, aren't they, Claire? And I know we'll come to sleep in a little bit, but if we just look at fatigue here,
Yes.
and yeah.
Yeah, no, and really, really common issues. And so my advice is make sure there's nothing physical causing you to feel so tired. So speak to your GP and rule out causes of tiredness like anemia or thyroid dysfunction. And then it's just really starting small, that you can get a sense of achievement because you can tick something off in your mind. You can say, right, I've done it. Literally, as I said, 5-10 minutes is far better than nothing. And then I think if you can do it as part, if you can exercise as part of a community, if you can set up a regular date, if you can do it with other people, so you can spur each other on. If you can find something that you really enjoy doing. So for example, I like running, but I like listening to audiobooks, so I can combine the two together. So that can also, so you might not look forward to going for a walk or whatever exercise it is, but you might look forward to listening to an audiobook or a podcast or something. So they are just a very few top tips, but I think doing it in with other people can be helpful, don't you, Helen, to
Definitely.
spur each other on, especially when motivation is really low.
Yeah, because when you're busy chatting, you know, time goes really quickly, and it's very enjoyable, you know, and it's nice to kind of have that community as well. And great feedback here from Sophia, where she said she found that her fatigue lessened the more exercise she did. And that is so true, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, after a good brisk walk or a workout, you can really feel that kind of lovely surge of energy go through your body. So well done you. So hopefully that helps. So Claire, we've had a couple of questions related to HRT. So can I suggest we maybe take them at the end, because they'll apply, I think, more holistically to a lot of what we're talking about. So for those of you who have put in questions about alternatives to HRT, and you know how HRT can help, if you could bear with us, we will come to them, but towards the end, after we've got 4 more pillars of lifestyle medicine to go through. But HRT is such an important part of the conversation, isn't it, around menopause symptoms? We'll cover that then. So Claire, moving on to the third pillar then, sleep. Now, as many of us will know only too well, sleep is one of the first things that can go during the menopause transition. So it would be super if you could help us to better understand what's going on in our bodies that can make sleep more difficult. And that can be both falling asleep or indeed staying asleep.
No, absolutely. So again, with the changing hormones and the decrease in estrogen, there are changes in neurochemicals in your brain, and that can mean that you are more prone to nighttime wakening, that you're not getting into such deep sleep. And for some women, it'll be difficulty getting off to sleep. And so it may be that you don't wake feeling as rested or restored as you did before the menopause. So there's a direct effect of hormone change, and then there's the indirect effect of all the other symptoms of the menopause and the impact that they can have on sleep. So, for example, hot flushes and night sweats, by definition, can wake you up. It may be anxiety. It may be that you're waking up at 3 a.m. and then you just can't get back to sleep because your brain is whirring. It might be stress. It might be aches and pains. It might be your bladder waking up. Because the bladder is suffering from a lack of estrogen as well. So many reasons to conspire against you. But I think it's quite reassuring to know that you usually get your most restorative sleep in the first 4 hours of sleep. And so actually, if you've had that first 4 hours, it's sort of learning to take the pressure off yourself, isn't it? We do want you to try and get a good night's sleep, and we do want you to wake feeling restored. But if you can get that first 4 to 5 hours of sleep, you can be reassured when you wake up that you've had the good restorative bit. And often women find that really quite a soothing thought, and then you're not lying there worrying about the fact that you're not getting to sleep. And we're going to talk about the health risks associated with chronic insomnia and not sleeping well. And so this is how CBT works. So trying to take the worry out of not sleeping can help your sleep. So yeah, complex situation, lots going on.
So Claire, your top tips for, how to prepare for going to bed and the environment that you create, because that can obviously make a huge difference to, the quality of our sleep as well.
Yes, no, absolutely. And Helen, I know that you'll share the blog as well, but there are some top tips. So the first bit is all about creating a habit. So a nighttime routine. So your body gets into the habit of switching off to go to sleep. And so that's like avoiding screens just before bed. Don't look at your emails just before you go to bed. Try and do something that will switch your mind off, whether it's having a bath or reading a book or listening to music. Make sure that your bedroom, I know this sounds really obvious, but make sure it is really dark and make sure it's cool and quiet. And sometimes that can be challenging if you've got a partner who snores, for example, but earplugs, etc. And then if you wake in the night, it is better not to lie in bed ruminating and worrying for more than 15 to, well, number one, don't lie and ruminate and worry. Try and create some and learn some techniques to help with that. For example, paced breathing can be really helpful. And if
I think Dr. Clare has frozen. Either Dr. Clare's frozen or I have frozen.
Now can everybody hear me?
I can hear you, Dr. Clare. I think it's Helen who's frozen, actually.
Okay.
For me, anyway.
Yeah, I'll carry on. So it's better not to lie in bed for more than 15 to 20 minutes if you wake up in the middle of the night. It's actually better to get up, have a herbal drink or a warm non-caffeinated drink, and then go back to bed when you're tired. Because what can happen if you lie awake for long periods of time, you can actually decondition your room to sleep. So that's something that I've learned in my journey of learning about menopause and sleep. And I know it's really easy, I touched on it earlier, to say try not to get upset or frustrated that you're not asleep. But that's sort of how cognitive behavioral therapy works, to manage those intrusive thoughts, to manage that frustration, and to really try and relax. So it might be listening to meditation in the middle of the night, And if that's what you want to do, have everything set up by your bed so you can just plug in and listen. So they are just a few of many, many different ways of managing sleep. And hopefully you'll find something that helps for you. Helen,
That
you're
was
back.
fantastic, Claire. And as some of you noticed, I froze, disappeared, and I'm back. And I'm hoping my son is not gaming tonight to interfere with my internet connection. So that was brilliant, that Claire. And so I've just posted an article you wrote for our symptom checker on sleep, and I'm posting a blog that will be publishing next week. It'll feature in next week's newsletter. So you're getting first sight of it here. But it's a brilliant blog by Dr. Sarah Gilchrist. She's a sleep expert who's very kindly written this for the My Menopause Centre community. Claire and Sarah did an event with us a while back. So fantastic. So and some good advice for yes, Anita, you can do squats while watching TV. That is so true. And we have a lovely blog by Lavinia Mehta about exercise snacking, just coming back to the exercise point earlier on, which I've included in there as well. So Claire, as we move on to the fourth pillar, lifestyle medicine, stress management. Now, as we know, stress can make everything feel worse. And we know that around half of women experience some kind of mood symptoms related to the menopause, and this can include stress, anxiety, and depression. So what would be super would be if you could explain for us the link between stress hormones and menopause symptoms, and then what we can do about it.
Yes, no, absolutely. So stress is that sort of feeling, isn't it, where you feel like you're not in control, you can't manage something. It comes with being overwhelmed. And basically what's happening in the menopause transition is that the loss of estrogen changes neurochemicals in our brain, and the change in neurochemicals like decreasing serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline, GABA, which somebody mentioned earlier, all conspire to make you feel more anxious and lower mood, and that can all add into this feeling of stress. So I think the first thing to do is appreciate what's going on. This is not a personal failing. It's almost understanding can just help you deal with it a little bit more positively. And then it's learning techniques to sort of self-care, self-soothe, that can just dial down the adrenaline, that can just dial down that stress response. So I mentioned paced breathing earlier, which is, if you just Google it, there are many different ways of doing it. It's really simple. It's literally breathing in and out very slowly and really focusing on your breathing to just calm down that sympathetic nervous system that might be firing on all cannons. Again, exercise or mindfulness, it might be meditation, it might be yoga. If you're really getting overwhelmed, then please ask for help. Have a chat with your doctor. It may be that there's talking therapies. It may be that there's medication like HRT or alternatives. It may be that cognitive behavioral therapy is going to be helpful to help break down some of the vicious cycles that get set up between your thoughts and your feelings, and how that then alters behavior, and then that feeds into the whole cycle of negativity. So that's a brief, broad overview, but everybody will find their way forward. The key thing is to acknowledge it and do something about it, and don't sink.
Brilliant. And I'm just posting, Claire, an article that you wrote on menopause and anxiety, which contains lots of tips and links in that to some mindfulness apps and other things that we've recommended. Now, on to the fifth one, avoidance of risky substances. And here we're talking about alcohol and cigarettes predominantly. Claire, I'm sure on one level we all know, but can you remind us why limiting alcohol, caffeine, and smoking matters during the menopause?
Yeah, so really interesting. I mean, they're sort of lessons for life. If you smoke heavily, you're more likely to have an earlier menopause than if you don't. And obviously, the more time of your life spent without estrogen, the greater the risk of osteoporosis and heart disease. And smoking also increases the risk of heart disease and osteoporosis also, and can make your hot flushes worse. So yeah, look, I know that you know this, but smoking is unhelpful. Alcohol so many women I speak to say that they're reaching for another glass of wine or a gin and tonic in the evening to just turn off their frazzled brain, to try and get to sleep. It's nice, it's a nice thing at the time, but unfortunately, how we process alcohol decrease, well, it sort of changes with age, and it probably changes with the menopause as well, with the change of hormones. And so we can have worse hangovers. Alcohol affects sleep. And again, like smoking, it increases the risk of heart disease and osteoporosis and many different cancers if you drink beyond healthy, safe limits. So it's really tricky because this is not, for many women, a difficult, this is can be a difficult time for many women. And this is the way that many will tell me that they're self-soothing, but the challenge is to find something instead so that you're not doubling your alcohol intake or tripling it, because you'll feel better. Feel so much better in the long run, and it's better in the long term for your health. If you feel that you need support with decreasing or stopping smoking or alcohol, then there are lots of resources on the NHS website and probably through your GP surgery as well if you ask at reception. So I know you've heard it all before, but there are reasons and health reasons for it.
And yeah, there are. And, as we've discussed so often, sometimes we know this is easier said than done. If it was that easy, there wouldn't be a massive weight loss industry, anti-smoking industry, patches, etc. But it really is important to find your reason why, isn't it? And to get the right support, because all these tweaks and changes that you've discussed really can make such a big difference. And I know as well, Claire, so many, people who have that extra glass of wine or a glass of wine just to kind of get to sleep. But in the long term, it really doesn't help. It can exacerbate all the symptoms that you've described. And on that vein, I'm going to put a link to a blog that I put a link in to a brilliant article that Claire did about alcohol and the menopause and how it impacts us. But I'm also going to post a blog that we had as an extract from a book about tips on how to cut down alcohol and to ease menopause symptoms. And I would highly recommend reading both, because there's lots of great practical advice, I think, in there. So Claire, that brings us then to the final, and I would say last but certainly not least, positive social connections. Now, this is so often underestimated, isn't it? Connection, and yet there are now so many research studies that show the detrimental impact that loneliness can have on physical health and on mental health. So just help us to understand, to start with, Claire, why social relationships and connections play such an important role in our health.
Absolutely. So what's really interesting is we know that social interaction, doing things with other people, whether it's singing or exercising or whatever, can actually be really good for our cognitive function. We know that it supports physical health, that if you are connecting socially, it might help almost take with symptom relief in the menopause transition, because if you're talking about symptoms, you're validating symptoms, you're removing a lot of anxiety around symptoms, you're sharing stories that can provide comfort for other people. You can feel that comfort that comes back to you. So that can be really helpful, because we know that women who don't feel prepared for the menopause, who don't talk about it, often are more likely to feel more under pressure to just cope, and more isolated, and more likely to see the menopause negatively rather than positively. There's obviously practical things. So we've spoken about exercising with other people. If you're entering into a healthy eating plan with your partner or your family, then that can obviously be really helpful, and everybody can spur each other on. And then many women suffer from loss of libido as they go through the menopause transition. They may have vaginal symptoms, they may have bladder symptoms, and just keeping all those lines of communication open can also engender a healthy, intimate relationship as well. So one person doesn't end up feel rejected or wondering what's happening. And just so communicating can be so helpful. So there are psychological reasons, relationship reasons, and actually real health reasons also in terms of going forward from midlife and beyond in a more healthy way. It's a really good time to take stock, isn't it? I think that's where we're getting to with this, that we're talking about so many different aspects of life to try and help us be as healthy as we can as we go forward into the menopause and beyond.
Yeah, I know when we originally discussed, that this was a theme for World Menopause Day. And as we got into it and really looking at these 6 pillars, it really is about taking, and what we liked about it is taking that holistic approach to life. And to be honest, whether you're in the menopause transition or not, these are all really valuable and sensible things to do that set you up for a health span as well as lifespan. And I think as we're living for longer, and as medicine and technology progresses and keep us alive for longer, we want to be alive with good health quality of life, and not just to be living or surviving. We want to thrive. And so it's never too late, really, is it, Claire, to start making these the foundation stones, the pillars of good health and good life into your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
No, absolutely. It's never too late. It really is never too late. And I know we'll probably talk and answer some questions about HRT, but HRT is brilliant in many ways. But HRT by itself often isn't as helpful as HRT plus really taking a good hard look at your lifestyle. Go for your 40 plus health checks, which have been in the news this week. It's brilliant. Menopause Mandate have campaigned. We've supported them to get menopause into the 40 plus health check, to start talking about some of these health risks that increase as we go through the menopause and beyond. And it's a really good time to start making small changes that will keep you healthy and reduce those risks. I mean, heart disease is sobering fact, the biggest cause of mortality of women worldwide, dementia in the UK, cardiovascular disease worldwide. But we can do things about it now in our midlife that can help the risk as we go forward. Women's risk of heart disease overtakes that of men's in the menopause transition. 1 in 2 women will have a fracture related to osteoporosis over the age of 50, which is a staggeringly huge number of women. It's 1 in 5 men. So if you know that now, you can obviously do things now
Do something.
to reduce that risk, going forward.
Yeah, and that's so important, because so many of the older women in particular that I know and love, it's even the fear of falling and getting a fracture that stops them from doing things because they have osteoporosis. So as we say, it's never too late to start. And hopefully with the advice that you've given us this evening, there's people will find their reason why. Now, I know I'm just posting a link to, we created a free Facebook group for community for women to come together. So if you feel that would help you, I've just given the link here. It's a fabulous community of really supportive women. And we do a doctor drop-in where we answer, your questions every few weeks as well. And we've had some, you have great comments as we've gone through this conversation. So thank you, Anita. Yes, I agree. I think that, as there's more discussion about menopause in the workplace and in the media, we really are seeing more and more men, husbands, partners be supporters and allies and advocates for women in these, which is so important. And as Claire, as you said, it's really important to ask for help and to not suffer in silence. Now, we've got a few minutes left before we wrap up for this evening. So I thought this might be a good point, Claire, to come back to HRT, hormone replacement therapy. We've had some really good questions about this. But before we get into those questions, maybe if you could just give us, a few words around why hormone replacement therapy can be so effective for so many symptoms, in addressing the fluctuations and ultimate decline that we see in estrogen?
Yeah, so symptoms and the health, long-term health consequences of the menopause are due to decrease in estrogen. And HRT just aims to give you enough estrogen back to help manage the symptoms and help reduce the long-term health consequences. And that might be even a low dose of estrogen will help protect your bones. We don't know what the threshold is for reduction of risk of heart disease, and everybody's dose, everybody's threshold for what they need to manage symptoms will be different. So HRT, what I always say, it's the most effective way of managing the menopause, most symptoms, but not all symptoms, for most, but not all women. And I'm interested, there have been a couple of questions about alternatives to HRT as well. So, but I think that's why it's really important that we're having the discussions like we're having this evening, because it really is holistic care as well. So yeah, HRT is predominantly giving you the estrogen. You need to take progesterone if you haven't had a hysterectomy, because estrogen can thicken the womb lining. So it's estrogen and progesterone, and some women will also add a tiny weeny bit of testosterone because that can help libido also.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And we've had an excellent question in here, one that I know you often get. How long can you stay on HRT?
Yeah, so the issue with HRT is that there is a really small increased risk of breast cancer. And in absolute numerical terms, that is very low. So it's the Women's Health Initiative study showed that the risk of breast cancer from having on average 2 units of alcohol a night, which is like a double gin and tonic, a pint of beer, quite a small glass of wine, the risk of breast cancer was higher in absolute numerical terms than taking HRT in that study. So the risk of HRT is related to how long you take HRT for. So the risk of breast cancer is related to how long you take HRT for. So how long can you stay on HRT? I always say you can stay on it for as long as you want to stay on it for, as long as you are having that annual review and you're having a check-in, you're thinking about your own risks and your own benefits, because that will vary from woman to woman, and then making a decision that's right for you for the year forward. So there's no arbitrary limit of how long you can take HRT for. You don't have to stop it after 5 years. You don't have to stop it at 60, but you do just need that annual review. What are the risks? What are the benefits? How do they apply to me?
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. So a couple of other questions that we've here, and then we'll come to the lady who's asked the question about testosterone. What are the alternatives to HRT and to herbal medicine? So maybe you could speak some more about the prescribable alternatives to HRT.
No, absolutely. So there are some prescribable alternatives to HRT, and what you choose really depends on what your symptoms are. So if you've been advised that you, for the moment, can't take HRT, or HRT is too risky, and you're having hot flushes, then antidepressants can help hot flushes. There's a tablet called clonidine that somebody mentioned, which is actually a blood pressure tablet, which is licensed to help manage hot flushes. There is a medication called oxybutynin, which is actually licensed for bladder issues. If you're having to run to the loo really quickly, oxybutynin is one of a number of different types of medication that can be helpful. And they're all available through the NHS. And then there is a drug called fezolinetant, or there is a relation called I'll think of the name in a second, elinzanetant. And they are as effective as HRT in managing hot flushes and night sweats. Unfortunately, at the moment, they're only available privately, and the cost is around £50 to £60 a month. By next year, hopefully, they should be available through the NHS as well. You can have them prescribed if you see an NHS doctor, but sadly, you have to pay for the medication. So they are the main prescribable alternatives, and If it's psychological symptoms that are really bothering you, then antidepressants do have a part to play. And then it's so important then you look to your lifestyle and exercise and diet also. Herbal remedies, I don't talk in detail about because you really need to speak to a trained herbalist if you're going to go down a herbal route.
Yeah, and you know, you always say, Claire, just because it's herbal doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. It's
Yeah.
really important to make sure it's from a good source, but there can be interactions, unintended consequences, so to speak, of taking some of them.
Yes. Yeah. And I know somebody's just asked if there's any particular antidepressant better than any other. So if you're on tamoxifen, you do need to avoid some of the SSRIs. Um, but venlafaxine, which is an SNRI, can be really effective. And I'll pop these names here. Venlafaxine. So it's have a chat with your doctor and they will take into account what other medication you're taking. Sometimes you might have side effects on one antidepressant and need to change to another. I usually start a really tiny low dose and then work up slowly to minimize side effects.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And I'm on that vein, I'm also going to post a link to a brilliant article that you wrote about taking HRT and the family history of breast cancer, in case that's helpful for any in the call. Now, earlier in the chat, we had a really interesting question, and I know we can't give individual advice, Claire, but from someone on this evening's webinar who was on HRT and had a Mirena coil, but was taken off HRT because the Mirena coil slipped and she experienced thickening of her womb lining, and now her symptoms are coming back. So might be helpful to talk about the importance of progesterone, but potentially in more general terms, what one could do in those circumstances.
Yes, no, absolutely. I'm really sorry to hear that. And hopefully this will be a resolvable situation and you will hopefully be able to go back onto HRT. So the Mirena is brilliant. It lasts for 5 years, and if it's in the right place, it releases a tiny amount of progesterone and keeps the womb lining thin against the activity of estrogen, because estrogen acts to try and thicken the womb lining. If the womb lining thickens, then there is a small increased risk of what we call endometrial hyperplasia, and down the line, if that was just left, or even cancer of the womb lining. So it sounds like they're on it with this. The person asking the question, then they will probably need to do a little tiny sample. And then the Mirena could hopefully potentially be repositioned, or an alternative progestogen given. But if you're having symptoms while you're waiting for all of that to happen, then thinking about some of the alternatives that we've just spoken about, depending on what your symptoms are, would be really important. So having a chat with your GP, if it's hot flushes, manage the hot flushes with the medication to manage hot flushes. If it's anxiety or low mood, manage the anxiety or the low mood. And don't forget to look at lifestyle factors as well. So very broad brushstrokes, but I hope that if you feel like you're not having your situation resolved or you're not getting the advice that you need, then please go back to your doctor. And it sounds like you might need to be seeing a gynecologist. Obviously, I don't know the history, but yeah, go back till it's sorted.
Yeah, that's really helpful, really clear, Claire. And so I think we've time just for a couple of more questions. So great one here. We all live this, Claire, don't we? Can anything help with brain fog?
Oh, yes, I know about brain fog. So lots of things can help brain fog. And the first reassuring thing to know is that if you did nothing at all, it would probably get better with time. The second thing is that brain fog occurs because our brain is undergoing this massive shift. As you lose estrogen, even the memory pathway changes from one side of the brain to the other. There are lots of changes, and your brain is undergoing this massive adaptation. So that's what's happening. HRT can be helpful. If you're not sleeping, managing sleep can be helpful. Exercise can be helpful, relaxing. Try not to, I know this sounds really difficult and flippant, and I don't mean to be. If you try not to worry about brain fog, actually, it's not as bad, because if you look at the studies where they've actually measured brain function parameters, like for example, they make you memorize a list and they check your recall, the actual differences are not that great. But obviously, we're living this, we're experiencing it, and it's really annoying, and it can provoke anxiety and more stress and knock your confidence. And if you can try and not let it get to you, and you have techniques like you might have an iPad or a pad of paper, or just work off to-do lists, which is what I do all the time, then actually it can keep your confidence in yourself buoyant while all of this situation is resolving. It's like shaking a snowstorm and waiting for everything to settle. It will get better, and it's just hanging on in there with a few techniques while it's getting better.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Then two related questions. I think they're two sides of the same coin. How long do symptoms last, and do you go back to normal once you're through the menopause, or do symptoms go on indefinitely? And then what happens after HRT? What are the next steps, and what happens with symptoms?
Yeah. Okay, so on average, symptoms of the menopause last approximately 8 years, but it's really tricky to know. Do you count from the perimenopause? Do you count from when your periods stop? But that is broadly the average. If you take HRT, it doesn't pause the body and brain's adaptation to the new state of low estrogen. So what happens is we lose estrogen, the snowstorm has been shaken, and then gradually everything slots back into place. It might slot back into a different place, but things do calm down. And if you take HRT, it doesn't stop that calming down of the situation. So when you stop HRT, you will feel how you're programmed to feel at that age. So put in really simple terms, if you are programmed to have hot flushes for 8 years, you stop HRT after 5 years, you'll probably go on to have hot flushes. But if you take HRT for 10 years, when you stop HRT, you'll probably feel fine. And if you are thinking of stopping HRT, I usually recommend decreasing the dose first and dipping your toe in the water. And then if you feel shocking, if the hot flushes come back at a lower dose, you know that you need to go back up, or you know that you're going to have symptoms, at least if you do want to stop the HRT. So hopefully that's answered the question. And to the person who's recommending, who asked for a blog, a result, I've just popped that International Menopause Society information on brain fog also.
Brilliant, thank you. And I also put in the brain fog blog from the symptom checker on the website too. So that last question of the evening goes to testosterone, and I'm about to post a link to an article you wrote on testosterone. So Claire, just a few words on how testosterone can potentially help.
Yes, brilliant. So testosterone in women and men slowly decreases from our late 20s, and that decrease doesn't accelerate in the menopause transition. And actually, fun fact, it probably goes up again a bit in your 70s. Don't know why, but it does. And so in the menopause transition, it's not like estrogen. We don't suddenly have a drop off. But if you add a little bit of testosterone, evidence suggests that it can help sex drive or libido. If you have absolutely zero libido and zero sexual response, then HRT and then testosterone. So you need to be taking HRT, you need to be taking the estrogen, you then add a bit of testosterone, and that can be helpful. We're always aiming to keep you within a normal limit for that of a woman. So although side effects like acne-like spots and the odd extra hair on your chin are actually quite common, they are generally reversible. And that is, if you stick with that very small dose, that it shouldn't be anything worse than that. Unfortunately, we don't have hardcore evidence from studies to show that it does increase muscle mass and that it does help mood and that it does help brain fog. Some women tell me it absolutely, definitely does. But if you look at the studies, there's not a lot of difference between dummy or placebo and the testosterone. So there's a big placebo effect. You can argue, well, if it's only placebo effect and it's helping, does it really matter? As far as we know, there are no health risks associated with taking testosterone, but we do need a lot more research than we've got at the moment. And I know it's ongoing. That's where we're at the moment with what we know about testosterone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Well, look, thank you so much for all those brilliant questions. And thank you, Claire, for sharing your fantastic expertise. And so it just leaves me to hand back to Aideen to close out the evening.
Oh, thanks, Helen, and thanks so much for such a great event this evening. So much information, Dr. Clare. Really helpful, really useful. And of course, thank you all for joining us this evening as well, and for the amazing questions. Hopefully you found it as helpful as I did. So following the event, you'll all get the recording. Please feel free to share it with friends, and that's it, I'm afraid. So good night, everyone, and thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.